So should you go for Flins' Constellations or his weapon? In this video I'll be comparing all of his Constellations and explaining them, and also telling you how much damage increase you're gonna get by obtaining them, and then comparing them to his weapon and also the refinements on his weapon, and then seeing which is the right way you can whale for Flins. Should you go for the cons first or the weapon first? Before we continue that though, if you're trying to get his Constellations or his weapon, I'd recommend getting your Genesis crystals from ldshop.gg. It's a cheap, fast, and secure top-up website where you can get different games currencies including Genshin Impact for 20% cheaper or more. Check it out in the link in the description or the pinned comment. But yeah, now for comparing his Constellations and his weapon, first of all, let's start with the signature weapon, Blood-Soaked Ruins. It's going to be a 5-star polearm, and in general, the full things it's going to give you is going to be 22% crit rate from the substat. It's going to give you 36% lunar damage bonus, which is pretty good. It's also going to give you 28% crit damage increase from the passive, and then also can give you 12 elemental energy, which is going to be pretty good. It can allow you to just completely forget about energy recharge on him, even though it's not a big problem, but it's a decent thing to have. The biggest thing about this weapon is probably going to be the lunar charge damage bonus. It's going to be a pretty good and rare stat, especially if you don't have Inefa. The rest of the things are also going to be pretty good. It's just crit rate and crit damage, although not super necessary. You can get them from very different weapons, but in general, they're going to be pretty decent too. So this weapon is going to be a very good weapon on Flins. Obviously, it's going to be his best weapon, and usually it's going to result in around a 15% damage increase to around a 30% damage increase. It depends on which team you're going to be playing them in and which weapon you had before. Obviously, if you had like a free-to-play weapon, for example, like the craftable or something like that, it's probably going to be a 30 to 35% damage increase. But if you had good weapons, for example, like Staff of the Scarlet Sands or something like that, it's probably going to be more of a 15% damage increase or somewhere around that. I'd say it's about as good as the usual, average signature weapon for most DPSs, maybe a little bit above average, because as I said before, if you don't have that damage bonus, then obviously it's going to be a huge improvement, and it's going to be a rare stat to like find. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a very good signature weapon, and with the refinements, it's also going to be around the same. You can expect up to like 6 to 7% damage increase for each refinement. Alright, so now moving on to his Constellations. I'm just going to explain them very quickly, see if they're good, and then give you how much damage they're probably going to give you in general. So C1 is basically just going to decrease the cooldown of your elemental skill, and then it's also going to give you 8 elemental energy every time a party member triggers a lunar charged reaction with a cooldown of 5.5 seconds. So it's basically just going to allow you to have more bursts in your rotation. You probably can fit a third burst in one rotation if you have enough energy recharge, or it can make the second burst more comfortable to have. It's one of the two, but in general, it's going to be a pretty good Constellation, especially if you can fit a third burst. Usually it's going to result in around like a 25% damage increase, and that's going to be super good, especially for a C1. Usually it's not that much. So yeah, C1 is basically just less cooldown and more energy, which is going to allow you to have more bursts in your rotation, which is more damage. It's going to be around a 25% damage increase, which is pretty good. Now C2 is that after you use your special elemental skill, when you normal attack, it's going to deal extra lunar charge damage with a multiplier of 50% of Flins' attack, just basically just extra damage. And then when you have the second moon sign, so you're gonna have to need a second not cry character on your team, and you hit an opponent with your electro attacks, his electro resistance is gonna be decreased by 25%. So it's basically just resistance shred, which is gonna be super good and valuable. So yeah, C2 is basically just extra damage and a resistance shred, which is gonna be very valuable. Usually it's gonna be around a 20% damage increase from C1, which is also pretty good for a C2 in my opinion, especially considering that C1 and C2 are right after each other, so it's definitely going to be pretty good. C3 is just going to increase your burst level, but that's actually going to be more valuable than usual. It's going to result in your multipliers getting increased, and that's going to be a decent amount of damage. So it's going to result in around a 12% damage increase, which is super good for a level Constellation, honestly. Usually they don't do that, but for him, since his burst is going to be a decent part of his damage, the huge multiplier increases are going to be pretty valuable. C4 is basically just going to increase your attack by 20% and then increase your elemental mastery based on your attack. Basically just more attack and elemental mastery. It's going to result in around like a 9% damage increase according to my calculations, but obviously that's going to vary a lot since it depends on how much elemental mastery and attack you already had before and stuff like that. So it's definitely going to be different for different people, but in general I don't think it's going to be that valuable simply because those stats are going to be widely available and from a lot of sources, so you don't really need a C4 for you to get more attack and elemental mastery like that, but it's definitely decent, but I wouldn't recommend just going for it on its own. C5 is just level of your elemental skill. This is definitely going to be his worst Constellation, probably like a 1% damage increase. Very little, it just doesn't matter pretty much. And then finally, C6 is probably just one of the simplest C6s we've seen in a while, but it's going to be a very good C6. It's just that the damage you deal to opponents with your lunar charge is going to be elevated by 35%. Elevated is going to be a new thing. It's not increased by 35% or something like that. It's going to be elevated. So elevation is basically just a new multiplier, and it's basically you take all of the damage you had after all of the damage bonuses are applied, after all of the crits are applied and everything, and you just multiply it by 35%. So it's a completely new multiplier, and it's just going to effectively increase all of your damage by 35% straight up. And then also it's going to elevate all of your party's lunar charge damage by 10%, which is going to be super good. Just adding like completely different multipliers like that is going to result in a lot of damage. Usually it's going to be around like a 40% damage increase. As I said before, it's pretty simple to calculate. It's a completely different multiplier, so it's going to result in around like a 35 damage increase for Flins, just straight up. Any damage you were dealing before is going to go through a 35% multiplier, and then maybe around that 5% extra just from the team-wide increase, which is going to be pretty good. But yeah, it's a super good C6 in my opinion. Having a completely different multipliers like that is something I don't think we've seen before yet. But yeah, I like it a lot. So it's not really going to change his playstyle or anything like that. It's just, there you go, another multiplier for you. Alright, so now for the final conclusion, how should you wish? So here are the damage increases tables we've seen before. Based on that, we can see that R1 and C1 are going to be pretty close in terms of how much damage they're both going to give you. So between them, it's going to depend. If you have a decent weapon and you have enough, in that case, I would definitely recommend just going for C1. I think C1 is going to be pretty good for Flins, especially since, as I said before, C2 is also going to be pretty good. So if in the future you also get one of his constellations, then in that case, you already have C1. So it's going to be a better path in general. But if you don't have enough and you don't have a good weapon already for Flins, let's say you only have like the craftable weapons or something like that, in that case I think R1 is going to be pretty good, especially if you don't have enough, because that lunar charge damage bonus is going to be pretty rare to have, and having it from the weapon is going to make up for the lack of enough a little bit. So if you don't have enough or a good weapon, like at least a 5-star weapon, I'd probably recommend just going for R1 in that case. But other than that, I think C1 is going to be more valuable than R1. After that, you just want to go for the rest of the constellations. Most of them are going to be pretty good except for C5. Obviously not necessary, but they're going to be pretty decent. But in general, to be honest, would I recommend going for Flins' constellations? Probably not. At least in this point in the game right now, I don't think it's necessary at all. If anything, you want to invest in them a little bit, I'd recommend getting like C1 R1 and that's it. I wouldn't even recommend you going for C2. I think it's just not necessary. But if you want to go for it, he definitely has decent constellations. But yeah, if you have a good weapon, you have enough, then go for C1. If you don't, then in that case, get R1 and then you can go for C1 or C2 or whatever. Personally, I'm keeping him at C0. Tell me what you guys are going to be getting in the comments for him. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.